A severe winter blizzard had almost swallowed a quiet highway in Washington. Visibility all around was so low that the road ahead could not be seen even one step away. In a situation like this, a traveler named Thomas was forced to take shelter in a small remote cabin by the side of the highway on his way to Seattle. That cabin, booked online, seemed like a completely isolated island in the blanket of white snow all around. Outside, there was the whistling sound of the wind and the fury of the snow. Just as Thomas was sitting inside the cabin by the stove trying to warm himself up a little, the sudden silence of the night was broken when his parked car alarm outside went off. At first, he thought it had probably happened because of the strong wind, but through the blurry darkness on the other side of the window glass, he saw a sight that froze all the blood in his body in an instant. Even through the thick white curtain of the blizzard, it was clearly visible that someone was standing silently right beside his car. The most unusual thing was that even in such a strong storm, that figure was not moving even once. Thomas immediately took out his cell phone and tried to call 911 for help, but unfortunately, because of the weak network inside the cabin, the call kept disconnecting. Even though the line got disconnected before making a connection the last time, his incomplete call and the location of the cabin were automatically recorded in the emergency system. Right at that moment, there was a light knock on the cabin's outer door. After staying silent for a few seconds, the same knock was heard this time on the side window. Then from the back wall of the cabin too, the same sound floated over. It was as if someone was slowly walking all around the cabin. Right in the middle of those knocks, a kind of unclear murmur was floating from outside, as if someone was whispering something in a very low voice. Out of fear, Thomas's breathing grew heavy, even as he tried to hold the cell phone tightly. His fingers were shaking so much that he kept making wrong taps on the screen. Gathering courage, as he looked toward the window again, he realized that the figure standing beside the car was no longer there. But a few moments later, outside the window on the other side of the cabin, the same shadow seemed to be seen again for a brief instant. Outside, the fury of the blizzard was still going on, and inside, after every single knock, he felt as if someone was standing silently right on the other side of the door, listening to the sound of his every breath. Exactly like this, 15 long minutes passed in panic. Finally, outside the cabin, the blue and red siren lights from a distance started to flash in the snow. Getting the information from the incomplete 911 call, a nearby patrol unit reached there to conduct a welfare check out of fear of potential danger. As soon as the police car came to a stop in front of the cabin, all the sounds outside suddenly stopped. Thomas gathered courage and looked outside the window again and saw that where that figure was just a short while ago, there was now nothing except blowing snow. Thomas told the officer on duty the whole incident. After hearing the details from Thomas, the police searched around the cabin but did not find anyone. However, on the fresh snow, they noticed a strange thing. Starting right beneath the cabin window, a trail of a single footprint led straight into the dark woods. But where those footprints had come from, there was no mark of that at all on the snow. It was as if someone had suddenly appeared in front of the window and then disappeared again into the darkness of those woods. No other human footprints were found anywhere nearby either. The very next morning, Thomas left the cabin and set off safely towards Seattle. Never again in his life did he gather the courage to spend a night alone in any remote place. However, one question haunts him to this day. Was that entity standing outside the cabin that night truly some lost human being? Or was it something in those snow-covered remote woods whose presence no logic known to anyone can explain to this day? Winter was in full force. Mark and his good friend Adam had gone to spend a holiday at a large vacation cabin in an isolated, snow-covered area near the Blue Ridge Mountains, far away from the city. With the surrounding pine forest buried under a blanket of snow, this cabin was their only home for a few days. The first few days went very peacefully. The blizzard outside and the warmth of the fireplace inside combined to create a perfect holiday atmosphere. But the trouble began after the second night. A severe blizzard was blowing outside. In the middle of the howling wind, a strange sound suddenly reached their ears. It felt like someone was standing right near the cabin porch, shivering or letting out a dry, human-like cough. At first, both of them thought it was probably some nocturnal animal of the forest or the sound of tree branches swaying in the storm, so they did not give the matter much importance. But as the night grew deeper, the surrounding silence began to grow heavy. It was about 4 a.m. Suddenly, Adam woke up. He clearly heard someone very carefully lifting the latch on the cabin's main door, a sound just like opening a door. At first, he thought Mark had gone outside, but looking to his side, he saw that Mark was still fast asleep. In the next moment, Mark woke up too. Both of them froze in fear and sat silently for a little while. Then, Mark slowly got up and checked the door. Nothing had entered from the outside, but seeing the state of the inner lock and latch made his heart tremble. The deadbolt on the main door was locked properly, but the bottom latch had moved just a little bit, leaving the door slightly cracked open. It was as if someone had stood right at the mouth of the door for a long time, pressing against it to try and open it. Just as they were preparing to go back to sleep after securing the door well again, the real terror began. The sound of something heavy striking the wooden walls of the cabin came from the outside. The sound was slow, heavy, and unsettling, not in bursts, but continuously moving from one wall to another. It felt as if someone was walking around the cabin, intentionally slapping the wooden walls with a hand or something hard. With every single blow, the room inside seemed to shake. Mark and Adam said nothing more and turned off the light. Then they sat in silence, trying only to understand who or what was outside. Once, the sound passed near the window. Again, it moved to the back wall. That night, not a single drop of sleep came to either of their eyes. The scariest thing was that at no point did the sound hurry. It was as if the entity outside knew that simply walking around slowly was enough to frighten them. The rage of the blizzard and that unknown presence outside the wall made the night unbearable. Sometimes the sound would stop, followed by a few seconds of silence. Right then, that same dry, human-like coughing sound could be heard again from outside the window. This made them start to feel that whatever was outside, it was not just an animal. Just before dawn, the sound slowly faded away. A streak of pale light was beginning to break outside. As soon as the morning light broke, they could no longer stay trapped inside the room. Gathering courage, they stepped outside the cabin. After seeing the sight outside, their blood turned to ice. Huge dents and deep scratch marks were visible on the outer wooden walls of the cabin. But the surprising thing was, except for their own footprints, there were no clear prints on the surrounding snow, neither of a human nor of an animal. It was as if something that surrounded the cabin all night leaves no sign of its presence, even in the snow. Who or what wandered around their cabin that night? They have found no logical answer to this day. On that winter night, when snow began to fall over a quiet valley in Northern California, it was not at all safe to be outside. Far from the city, Right in the middle of miles of empty fields and surrounded by oak trees, sat David's small one-story house. He had returned home from work a little earlier than usual, but as he turned his car into the driveway, fresh tire tracks caught his eye. The tracks on the snow were brand new, as if another car had turned around and left just a few minutes ago. David did not think much of it at first. He thought that maybe a delivery truck had pulled in by mistake and then turned around and left. But as evening turned into night and the snowfall grew heavier, a doubt began to creep into his mind. Around 9 at night, when he looked through the kitchen window, he saw an unfamiliar car parked right at the end of his driveway by the side of the road. The car's headlights were turned off, but the soft hum of its engine could be heard inside. The most uncomfortable part was that the car did not look like it had stopped because it was lost. It was parked in a spot from where the front door and windows of the house could be seen directly. A few minutes later, the car suddenly moved away into the dark without turning on its lights. David thought that the trouble was probably over. Still, his mind was not at peace. He checked all the doors on the ground floor carefully, pulled down the curtains, and looked at the driveway again. 2 sets of car tire marks could be seen on the snow, but as the snow fell thicker, it was no longer possible to tell where the tracks actually ended. Then he went to his bedroom. It was then around 2 in the morning, whether because of the extreme cold or from some unknown fear, David suddenly woke up. The temperature inside the room had dropped quite a bit. He moved the window curtain slightly and looked outside. That unfamiliar car had returned, standing completely silent in the exact same spot as before. This time, even the hum of the engine could not be heard. There was only the silence of the snow and the empty night. Through the dark glass of the car, there was no way to tell if anyone was inside at all. David decided that he would go downstairs and check all the doors again. But the moment his eyes fell on the bedroom door, his heart froze inside his chest. The soft light from the hallway was creeping inside from under the door, and floating over that line of light was a clear, dark shadow. Someone was standing right on the other side of the door, extremely carefully. With their slight movement, the pattern of light and shadow under the door was changing. The person had already entered the house, and they were now standing right outside David's door. There was no response left in David's body. Even the smallest sound would make the person outside realize that he was awake. Without saying a word, with trembling fingers, he took his phone out of his pocket. At first, he was going to call 911, but his throat had dried up from fear, and he did not want to make even a single drop of sound. So, using the emergency text option on his phone, he silently sent a message, understanding the seriousness of the situation. A quick reply came back from them. The police had been dispatched, but in this snowy night, it would take at least 18 minutes to arrive. The next 18 minutes felt like a lifetime to David. The shadow on the other side of the door did not move, only once. The door handle went down very slowly, almost noiselessly, as if testing to see if the door was locked. Then, a strange silence fell over the room. David sat stiffly on the bed, listening only to the beating of his own heart. Snow was still falling outside the window, and nothing could be heard except the soft sound of the wind and the distant trees. For a few moments, he thought that the shadow had probably moved away, but the very next moment, another brief movement was seen in the line of light under the door. Finally, the flashing red and blue lights of the police appeared in the front yard without sirens. Within a few seconds, the sound of heavy boots, the crash of a door breaking down, and the shouts of the police were heard. The police caught the man red-handed right inside a room of that snow-covered house. At the time of his arrest, a folding rope, a strong flashlight, and a large knife were recovered from him. Searching outside, the police also found a few more marks on the driveway and the roadside that had not been noticed before. The next morning, a cruel truth came out in the investigation. The unfamiliar man was no ordinary thief. He had been watching David's daily life for months. He knew what time David came home, which window's light turned on first, and which door was used the least at night. Investigators recovered a notebook from his car, where detailed notes were written about David's name, time, address, and house routine. Even after analyzing the first 2 sets of tire marks found on the driveway, the police realized that one set belonged to his car, but the other marks belonged to someone else. In other words, there were multiple people around David's house that night. The man was sent to jail, but David's terror never fully went away, because at the final stage of the investigation, the police revealed yet another terrifying truth. The car that was first seen at the end of the road on the night of the incident was not alone. At a very close distance, another car had also stopped for a while, and its tracks were even found on the snow. In other words, that silent hunter was not just one person. And when David was looking at the shadow on the other side of the door, at least 2 people outside had surrounded him.